it's Canoe, and you're tuning into Real Love, Real Stories. It's getting real today because I'm switching it up a bit and talking about finances in relationships. So in the guest chair today is Sarah Blanchfield. So listen, take notes, and enjoy. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you here and talking about finances. So perhaps, start by introducing yourself. I mean, I know the audience already knows who you are, but just for those that don't know you, do an introduction about you and your business.
Thanks. Yeah, it's lovely to be back. So my name is Sarah Blanchfield. I'm the owner of SB Financial. It's a financial coaching business, and I serve ladies and couples and just help people try to get some more peace and freedom around their finances by really helping them create budgets. We work through all kinds of different areas for people, just wherever they feel that they need to really kind of up their game, or just that areas that they would feel better in if they just got a little bit of a more structure or something like that. So I'm excited to talk about couples and finance because it's a big topic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I was actually, the other day I was looking at online something and I saw, I think it was Dave Ramsey's page where, it talks about research still shows to this day that, the number one cause for divorce is finance, right?
Yeah.
So, which is why I think this topic is very important for us to talk about. So, to dive right into it, how would you walk through a couple who comes to you and say, "Hey, Sarah, we want your help with finances. How do we work through our finances together?"
Well, I think first of all, I like to get to know a couple, and I think that the first thing that you really need to dive into is your kind of history and your emotions about money. One of the problems that people come up against when it comes to finances is that they think logically. They want to do the math.
Right.
If you just give up your coffee every day, then you'll have all this money. That's great, but I need coffee. So I talk with them, and we do a lot of kind of history discussion at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of those areas that hopefully people would do when they start dating, is talking about their family and what kind of things they learned about money when they were growing up.
Oh, I see. So you're talking even going back to like how you grew up and what was the relationship like with your parents and money and all that? Right.
It really influences how you approach money as an adult, what you learned as a child or didn't learn and had to learn on your own. And so one of the things that I suggest, and they don't have to talk about it in front of me, but I suggest for each of my couples is, you know what, go out to dinner, go someplace pleasant, have some nice food, or do an activity, go bowling, do something not related to money. Mm-hmm. Something fun that you enjoy doing together where you can have a conversation that's not an emotionally charged moment. And just talk through some questions about, this is kind of how I grew up and this is what I've learned. I've done this with my husband when we first started dating, and we continue to learn different things about each other. But the things in our history inform the way that we approach money now and how we feel about it and what things are important and what things are hot button issues for us.
Right.
And so it's really important for a couple to discuss that when they're not talking about paying bills.
Oh, so you're saying take them out of that, like having that conversation at home where the bills might be sitting on a table.
Right.
And you're talking about money, that might not be a good idea.
That's not the moment. That's not the moment because you're not going to be open to really listening when you're feeling stressed about paying the bills, or that they're not going to listen. Money is already emotionally charged. So if you put yourself in a place where you're having a good time and you're it's something you enjoy doing, you're so much more open to having a conversation where you're accepting a different person's point of view, because everybody has a different point of view when it comes to money.
Right.
So that's one of the first things I always suggest, is that people need to have a conversation about their history about money. Things that are important to them.
Right. So it sounds like you give them homework to take out of that session that you have with them, and they go and explore what their history is like with money, because not everybody has a dinner table discussion about finances growing up. So
no, not at all. I didn't growing up. I mean, really, for example, some of the things that I brought up with my husband was, my dad worked, my mom didn't. She was a stay-at-home mother. Huge benefits to having a stay-at-home mom, and huge challenges. And my parents didn't talk about money. My dad was laid off multiple times during my childhood growing up because he worked in the tech industry, and it's just really, it's really volatile.
Right.
But I remember wanting, going shopping and wanting a certain pair of shoes. And the message was, that's too expensive. That's too expensive.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me because, I'm looking at a $20 pair of pants thinking, this actually really isn't expensive. So I'm confused. Like, the logical part of my brain knew there was a disconnect, that there was something I wasn't being told, but I didn't understand what that was. My parents were trying to shield us from stress around money. They sent all 4 of us children to private school, which on one income and sometimes no income was a real trick.
Right.
And they did really creative things to make that happen. One of the wonderful things I learned from my parents was that they aligned their spending with their values.
Okay.
They wanted to send us to private school. It was important to them, and they made great sacrifices to make that happen. So I share this with my husband, and he talks about how he grew up not having shoes that fit. And that there was always a question about whether there would really be anything for clothes or food or things like that. And so, for example, he always likes to have a little bit of money set aside.
Okay.
It's a comfort thing for him. So I learned this early on because I don't really feel that need. I mean, I like having savings, but there's not an emotional component to savings for me that there is for him. And we learned this during those kinds of conversations that we have over dinner.
I like that. Okay.
Learning about the things that are important to each other at a time that's not, where you're stressed about money. So that's the initial homework. And I think, anybody can do this. If you're looking for, what kind of questions do I ask? What kind of things do we talk about? I was sharing with you, I'm going to have a little download for everyone for this episode. So it's just a little kind of discussion guide, some little questions to get you started if you want to do this in your marriage or in your partnership, your relationship with a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. You can use those questions just kind of as a jumping off point.
I like that. I like having resources for people to a guide for people to follow. So that's awesome. So we'll copy it, in the notes so people can download it. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay. Your couples go to dinner, for example, and then they talk about how they grew up and, what their feelings about finances are. And then, so they come back to you with their findings. And then how do you walk them from there to what's the next step?
The next step is really, we talk about setting up some kind of money rules and some money values. So as a couple, what are the rules that you both agree to abide by? So maybe it's something like, we won't spend more than $50 without talking to the other person. Or we won't, we won't decide to buy something from a certain area of the budget without talking to them first because they may have bought something else. So just some kind of rules of engagement.
Sure.
Again, this is totally outside of we're not even talking about the budget yet. This is what would make you feel good knowing, trusting that you kind of have these rules in place. And then deciding, each person kind of has a particular value that's most important to them when it comes to money.
Mm-hmm.
So for my husband, it's security.
Okay.
His most important thing that he needs from money is a sense of security.
I see. Yeah, which stems from how he grew up and, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my understanding that means that I know that he needs some money set aside, whether I think it's important or not.
Right.
Because it makes him feel better.
Yeah.
And I love him. So if it's going to make him feel better,
you want to do that for him.
Why not?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm trying to help people get to. And where we often struggle is we start talking about money and the budgets and the bills, and we don't have enough money for this. And then we kind of try to back into meeting each other's needs, and we have to start with the needs first.
Right.
So understanding the history, then we talk about some rules, and part of that is also, are you going to merge your bank accounts? Do you like having merged bank accounts? Do you need to have separate bank accounts? Couples work all different manner of ways.
Right.
And all ways are fine as long as it works for you.
Right. Yeah.
So we've done a couple of different versions as we've kind of gone along. I've certainly shared a bank account with my ex-husband, and it was a really burning experience with me because he was a spender and I liked to kind of pay the bills. But he would check the bank account and be like, oh, look, we have money in there. I bought something.
Oh.
It's like, oh, I have bills that are, they haven't cleared yet, but they're coming.
Yeah.
And so we constantly lived on the edge of overdrafting this joint account, and it was very stressful.
And
that was another story that I shared with James was this is a trigger, and I'm very sensitive about it. And so we have one bank account for bills that I manage. It's my name on it. He has his own bank account for all of his spending and different things, and it works great.
Wait, so you have your own bank account, which then you pay bills with, but it's not joined?
Nope.
And then he has his own. Does he pay bills with it?
Nope.
Okay, but that's what works for you guys.
Yeah, so he has certain things that are set aside for him to pay, gas, his personal spending. And then he transfers me the rest of, his paycheck as we delegate it out. I had lived in my home before he and I were married. And so all of the bills are in my name. Everything's already set up. And so from that logistical standpoint, it just made a lot more sense.
Right. Absolutely.
Not to kind of mess with. But it also gave me a feeling of peace. James is not a spender, but I have a sore spot about that.
Right.
It's not logical, it's emotional.
Yeah.
And James understands it, has nothing to do with my level of trust for him, but it has helped us just avoid something that is an emotional trigger for me.
Right.
And it works great. So we talk about rules, we talk about values, we talk about whether you want to have your bank accounts merged. So we kind of lay some groundwork.
Right.
And then we actually start talking about money and the budget. And the first thing we do when we really start talking about that is we do what I call a money audit. And I have a free worksheet that people can have for this too. just because it's one of the most powerful things. Everyone that's been through my coaching program says this was the thing that really changed my perspective.
Oh, that's awesome. So can you, how do you describe it? What's a money audit?
So it's really simple. It's a little bit time consuming, I'm going to be honest, but it's super powerful. It's basically, you would take the last 3 months of your bank account statements, any credit cards that you spent money on, print them all out. I'm a print person, so print them out, grab some highlighters, and you're going to go through everything and put it in some categories. How much did you spend on food? How much did you spend on, movies, gas, anything? You put it in your big categories. So for the last 3 months, that'll give you a pretty good anticipation and kind of good picture of how you're really spending your money.
Right.
And the thing is, it's a little bit like a retro journal, because you're doing it in the past when you weren't thinking about what you were doing. So this is how you really do it when you're not thinking about it.
Right. I like that. Yeah.
So instead of doing it for the future, and I did this for myself first. I don't know if you've ever done a diet where they're like, oh, track your food for 7 days. I can't do that. I'm so bad at it. And I change my habits when I do it.
Right.
And so it's not really an accurate picture. They're like, oh, don't change anything. Just write it down. I can't. Yeah. I will change it.
Yeah.
So I look backwards. You take 3 months. You sort it all out. And I have a Google sheet that I have pre-formulated calculations in there that people can use. It's really helpful. So if you're not a math person, it's in there with some instructions. But that shows you what you're really spending in each of these areas that you then need to consider as a part of your budget.
Yeah.
So lots of times people start with this framework of a budget that's given by some financial guru that tells you these categories that you should probably have. But it's not necessarily an accurate reflection of where you're spending your money.
Yeah, now, maybe not everyone is the same, yeah.
Right. Maybe you want to stop spending your money in a certain area. But it's good to know where you are currently spending your money. So when James and I did this, we discovered we needed a book budget. We like books.
Oh, like actually purchasing books.
Purchasing books. And we go to the library every week.
Oh, wow.
We're library people, and we still purchase books. When I did this for one of my clients, they needed a video game budget.
Interesting.
I don't need a video game budget, but they did. It was an activity that she and her husband enjoyed together a lot. It was one of their favorite things to do as a couple. And so this is where you really start to take the things that are really important to you and translate them into your budget.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've done that before. Shout out to my friend Michelle Williams, who had me do this, and I did it for 4 months. And what was so interesting that I found out was I was spending between $400 to $500 a month at Whole Foods. For one person. One person, groceries, $400 to $500 a month at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
That was like, I had no idea.
Yep.
I absolutely had no idea, but to see that on paper, and it was pretty consistent. I did it for 4 months, January through April. I had no idea. It was just mind-boggling to me, and to find that out on paper.
Yeah. So it is an exercise that can be a little bit scary to people sometimes, because they're like, oh, I don't want to see what I really spent. And so we talk through it together. It's like, no judgment. I have I have spent over $1,000 in 1 month on eating out. How is that possible?
Wow. Fine dining.
That's insane. No, it was like not fine dining. I was like, I should have gone to some really nice places. But it wasn't. And you know, we all have areas that if you don't pay attention, you don't see how it adds up.
Right.
And we all naturally do it. We don't want to pay attention. Because if we pay attention, that means on some level we feel like we have to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's going back to your diet analogy. I mean, it's like when you're really saying, I'm dieting and I'm not losing weight, and then you really put down everything you eat. You're like, oh, yeah, I've been like 600 calories over my limit. No wonder I'm not losing weight. But you won't know that until you write it down, you know, and see where your money or where your calories are going. So
right. And I think the beauty of this exercise too is that it helps. It's just factual, but it also means that you can see where you can really cut, you know, because the very next step is the thing that we do is we work on creating a personalized budget. Mm-hmm. And the first step I always do is what can you cut out that's not going to bother you? You know, maybe you're spending a bunch of money at Whole Foods. You're like, I could probably spend like half that and still be just as happy.
Right.
Like that probably wouldn't affect my well-being.
Right.
But it would free up some money.
Yeah, I don't have to shop for every single thing at Whole Foods.
Right.
You know,
and so we look at each individual thing and say, is this something that you can either eliminate or reduce that would not affect your personal well-being? One of my couples had 4 different streaming services, and I thought, in my head, that seems like a lot.
Streaming
they really just streaming for games, movies. Oh. And I thought, okay, that seems like quite a few. And they're like, no, we use all these. This is critical for us.
Wow, okay.
Okay. Then we don't need to eliminate it. If they had other areas that they were more than happy to reduce. And this is where it really comes into being personal and customized. So I don't throw out any percentages to anyone. You know, you should spend this, 25% of your income on housing. Who can afford to do that anymore? No one. And it's just, it doesn't reflect your life. It doesn't reflect the things that are important to you. And if you're going to really succeed as a couple at not fighting about money, achieving your goals, you have to know what's most important to you. And that's why we do all that pre-work at the beginning. Right. So by the time we come to the budget, you already know what's most important. You know what matters to the other person, and you know the kind of life that you want to build together. So, for example, my husband and I are not big gift givers. We talked about this a little bit in our love story episode. So our gift budget is really low because that's not something that's important to us, but we love doing experiential things. So we like going maybe on a day trip or to a play. We like having experiences together.
Right.
So that part of our budget is more important than another part. So once we kind of start working on that budget is where we can really start looking for ways to meet each individual and then the couple's needs, emotional and otherwise.
Right.
And that's the part too that sometimes people can need a little bit of help navigating because especially if they have some entrenched habits, it can be hard. It's like, I have a couple of mine that, my husband just doesn't understand why I need to travel. You're right, he may not. I don't understand why my husband needs another video gaming system. He has 5. I will never understand it.
And he doesn't understand why you need another cookbook, right?
I know. I just bought another one yesterday. He doesn't. But he enjoys the food. But what we've done is we make allowances for the things that are important to each of us, whether we understand it or not.
So on the personalized budget part, this is where you now identify what are some important things to each person, and then you create a budget for those specific things.
Right.
And it's not necessarily in the joint budget. This is like individual.
Right. So some of the things, if you have separate accounts, that might be something that comes out of your separate account. If you have a joint account, there are several different ways, and it really depends on the couple. And so it's hard to give one specific recommendation, but there's several different ways that you can separate out your money in a way that is really clear for everyone. And depending on the couple and how their brain works, we personally use You Need a Budget, it's an app. It's amazing.
What is it called?
It's called You Need a Budget.
Okay.
Which is kind of a funny name, but it's an app that you can have on your phone. You can use it on the computer. I think there's a free trial for like a month or something. It is more than paid for itself with the subscription that we have, but it's a way of associating a certain amount of money with a category. So instead of looking at your bank balance and saying, oh, we got money in there, you look at your You Need a Budget app and see whether you have money in that category.
Oh, I see.
So you're basically, you use that and it syncs to our bank account. So it does all that stuff. But it basically says, it's not, do I have money? It's, do I have money for that?
I see. Because you might have spent your dining out or entertainment budget, and you're saying, I have a lot of money in my account, but you have already exhausted that budget for that month.
Exactly. And so that helps us, and we set those amounts together. One of the other things that actually made our end of year review for 2018 really easy is that it has a lot of reporting features. So it showed us what we really did, and it was like minutes. It was like, oh, look, we thought we were doing, we thought this was a really great, budget amount for dining out, and we went over it every month.
So you need to adjust it accordingly.
Right. So there's lots of adjustments you can make in there, but that's one that we really like. And so you create a budget that basically has something allocated for each person's thing that they consider as really important. So I have money for my business, and he has money to save up for the new PlayStation that comes out in 2020. I don't know. We're saving up for it, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, if it makes him happy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it really is that simple, because I know, and because we each have something we consider important that is just a small portion of our budget, and the other person supports us in that, it makes it a lot easier to support them in the things that they want.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So once we create that budget, we kind of take, they have kind of a little bit of a gap where they work on trying to work their budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See how it works out, see what things what roadblocks they come up against. We do some email communication. I'm available for questions and things like that. One of the other things that I remind people is they need to set some regular kind of money dates. And you can do a variety of things to make these fun. When I first started doing budgeting with James, he didn't want to come. He didn't want to talk about it. He'd never done budgeting before. It was terrible.
Oh, so are you talking about actually creating like an appointment of sorts with your partner to say, hey, we're going to sit down on Friday evening to talk about the budget?
Exactly.
Like it's a standing appointment for each week or month.
each week, each month. We tend to do it the night before payday.
Okay.
So partially because we need the money to be assigned before the money hits the account.
Right. That's smart.
Otherwise, the money hits the account and you're like, yay, it's payday. Let's go out and eat, and then all of a sudden you have to kind of regroup.
Yeah.
Because you spent some of it already. So night before payday, we just sit down, and now it takes us a matter of minutes because we've been doing it for so long, and it's not painful anymore because we know.
Right.
It was a little painful at first, and so I did a couple of different things just to make it fun.
I want to hear them.
Well, we had one time we had snacks. One time, it's an adult podcast, but one time we did naked budgeting. It was a thing. He still talks about it. It was his favorite budgeting session ever.
Okay.
It's really hard to be mad at your partner when you're sitting there with no clothes on. You can take little intimacy breaks, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Seriously, remind yourself why you're, be goofy, go out to eat, or, get out of the house. If you fight a lot at your house, get out of the house. Go do something fun. Go to your favorite restaurant. Go grab coffee. Do something that is special, that makes it fun. Like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do something else that we really enjoy.
Yeah, I like that.
And after a while, it's not, you get in your routine, but you have these little money check-ins so that you don't get off track. If something happens or a bill comes in that you weren't expecting, you have a chance to address it before it becomes a big issue.
Right.
And the thing that has been really beneficial to us is we both know where we are at financially at any given point. And so one of the things that can happen when one person is managing the money and the other person is kind of oblivious, and I've been that person on both sides, is you have no real sense of what the other person is stressed about.
Oh,
So if you're the person that's oblivious, you're like, why are you freaking out?
Yep.
And they're wondering why you're not freaking out, right? And it becomes this sense of tension. And at the beginning of my relationship with James, I was managing all the money, and I was starting to freak out. And I thought, he's not freaking out because he doesn't see. He doesn't see what's coming in, what's going out. It's just lack of information. It's not because he doesn't care. And so by regularly sharing this information with each other, we always know. And it keeps it really, when things are tight, we both know things are tight.
Yeah, and you're not the only person stressed out about, money being tight. At least you'll be both knowing what's happening in your account and what's coming and what's not coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to one of those values is it's us against the problem.
Right.
It's not us against each other because we don't understand each other. It's how can we tackle this problem
together. Yeah.
Together. Because we're both fully knowledgeable.
Right. It kind of reminded me when I was married, I was the person who was totally hands off when it came to the budget. Mm-hmm. And he did finances. He did everything he tried to get me involved, but I just was like, oh, really? So I didn't want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. But then, when we went our separate ways, then I was like, it's actually important to do this. And, I wish I had listened because I would have done well in those few years where I was trying to figure it out. But like I said, I ended up, working with my friend who helped me with budgeting and all that, which helped me in the end. But I was one of those people, I didn't budget for anything. Money comes in and I spend it.
Yeah. Well, and for a lot of people, you don't have any level of structured financial education.
Right.
So, what else do? You just, that is kind of the default, is you get money in and the money goes right back out. And so, there's lots of different things. We do a lot of, in my coaching with folks, a lot of just basic financial education about different ways, different things that are important, different ways that they can meet their goals, ways that they can really reframe some of the maybe limiting beliefs that they've had about money in the past. Whether it's like, oh, money will always be there.
If you're rich, maybe.
If you're rich, or maybe you have family that likes to enable you by giving you money.
Right.
I had a family who, when I was in really hard financial straits, they kind of looked at me and they said, well, you made your bed. And you know what? It was so helpful to me.
Really?
It was. It was super helpful. I wasn't, at the time, it did not feel super helpful.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But it was helpful because then one of the things is I have to be on my game.
Right.
Like, I can't just assume that somebody's going to come and bail me out. And it changed my perspective about how I handled my money in a way that enabled me to live a far more independent and free financial life. And so because I reframed what was initially in my head a really negative experience, like, you're my family. Like, you're supposed to love me and help me when I'm going through a rough financial time. Hello.
Right.
No, this is their way of loving me enough to say, you have to learn this lesson.
Yeah.
And I did. And it ended up being a really good thing for me. But I had to reframe that experience in my head because, of course, the first time it happened, I was like, you guys are jerks. Why won't you help me with this?
Okay. Looks like, what is then, so they're working the budget and, kind of determining all those factors in terms of like what account is what bill or what would be then the next step from that?
Really, once they've got their budget kind of, I say in order, but a budget is really a fluid kind of thing. But once they're communicating about it regularly, they are adjusting it as they need to. They're creating it in a way that's manageable for them. Then we kind of start talking about how they can really optimize it. Okay. So the first step is just kind of getting something that works on the basic level.
Right.
Paying all the bills and getting some stuff in there that makes them feel good. Then it's more like, okay, how could we like really take this to the next level? What are our long-term goals? And some people start focusing on that first, and I suppose that's fine, but I always feel like, first of all, you should kind of nail where you're at. You need to feel confident that you can get all the bills paid. You can feel like you're having a good time. Okay, now we can focus on some long-term goals.
Like if you want to purchase a house, or if you want to take a trip somewhere in the near future, that kind of thing. Right. Okay.
Taking a big trip, retirement, buying a new car in the next few years, or any of those kinds of longer-term goals.
Right.
So we talk about what they would need to do to really meet those goals, things that they can do to take advantage of all kinds of things. So retirement match programs at their employer, things that they can do with buying a home. Are they a first-time home buyer? Are there grant programs available? So there's lots of different types of resources for achieving goals that lots of people just don't really know about.
So you help them with all these resources?
I do. So I've done a lot of personal research. I've done a lot of a lot of this I've used in my own life. I bought my own home as a single mom of 2 kids, making $17 an hour, which is not a lot. But I did it, and it worked really well for me. I took advantage of a grant program for my state because I was a first-time home buyer. Woo!
Right.
I got free money, and that worked great.
That's awesome.
And so I took advantage of several different things. I have student loans. I take advantage of multiple different programs that help me reduce my costs when it comes to paying back my student loans while still maintaining my good payment status. And so we talk about how, there's paying the bills, and then can we optimize the bills so that maybe we're paying a little bit less, or maybe we're taking advantage of a program that's available that you didn't even know was there, so that they can try to then meet their goals in a way that's smarter.
Right.
And for a lot of people, when they think about trying to have more financial freedom, the first thing that they think about is, I need to make more money. And that's kind of the default. And I tend to kind of work people through this framework, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit, although I'll tell you the exact framework now. The first framework is organize. So get everything together, organize your stuff, know what's there. The second one is optimize. So make sure that everything that's there is what you want to be paying for. You've gotten rid of anything you don't want. You've reduced things as much as you can in ways that make sense. The second one is really kind of outsmart. And so it's using those programs and grants and all those things that are available to you that you may not know about, that can really save you tons and tons and tons of money. So that you don't, it's really more about reducing the amount that's going out than necessarily increasing the amount that's coming in. Because for a lot of people, controlling our income is largely outside of our control.
Right.
We probably work for a company that maybe they cap their raises, or, maybe we would have to get a promotion and we just can't seem to do that. So I focus on the things that are within our control. Controlling what's going out of our account is within our control.
Right.
For the most part.
That's
we
huge.
Make a lot of choices about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that people feel so helpless about is they feel that money is outside of their control because they're focused on increasing their income.
Oh, yeah.
But that's largely outside of your control most of the time. And so by focusing on the things that are within your control, that helps you feel so much more empowered and free when it comes to your money, because you do have choices, you have options, and you have things that you can actively do. And so we make checklists, we have action steps for them to complete in between our sessions. It's an active process. Some of these things take a little while to get set up so that you can benefit from them. It's not hands off, but I'm there with people every step of the way. And so, and then really kind of the last part is when you really feel like you've kind of overcome this money barrier. It's working for you, and you're meeting your goals, and you've taken advantage of the things that you can that are within your control, to create a life that you really want. And so that's kind of the process I help people work through as they get to their budget, and then they start optimizing it and figuring out, how can I make it a little bit better, and how can I tweak it a little bit, and how can I take advantage of some things, so that then, ultimately, I want people to graduate to the point that they don't need a money coach.
Right. Yeah. They're doing well, and
that they have enough knowledge then to make the adjustments they'll need to make at other phases in their life. Because you always have to adjust.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you have a strong foundation of what steps you can take at any given point in your life, then you can do them over and over again. So as my life has changed from being married to being divorced to being remarried, it's, I've gone through these same steps over and over again. Okay, organize my stuff. How can I optimize it? How can I take advantage? What can I take advantage of now in my current situation?
Right.
Okay, now I'm feeling good. Okay, life has changed. Okay, organize my stuff again. How can I optimize it again? And I just keep recycling that same set of steps for each life change.
Yeah, when you just had a baby, so now you have another person to include on your budget, and so adjusting it accordingly, with the number of, family members you have and all that.
Exactly. And we started doing that when I got pregnant. And so we were thinking ahead, and that's one of the things that we really try to do in the part where we're talking about kind of, once we get past the basic budgeting, we talk about planning in the future. And that's been really powerful for a lot of my folks too, is that they're just kind of thinking about the next paycheck. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, as I started thinking further and further ahead, it was great. When the expense came up, it was like, oh, I got this. And that's a big stress reducer.
Yeah, for sure.
Start projecting and thinking ahead with what you know you'll need, then it's a lot less stressful. And it's simple things. It's like tires for your car.
Yeah.
You're going to need new tires. You know approximately when you'll need new tires. If you plan ahead enough to, you're saving, I don't know, $10. It doesn't take much to add up to new tires over the course of 4 years, or I think it's 4 years. You're supposed to replace your tires.
I don't even know.
When you get new tires, you're like, oh, look, tire budget, nailed it.
Oh, there you go. You don't have to stress about where's that money going to come from, because you already saved for it.
Right. It's not a surprise. It's like Christmas. Christmas is not a surprise.
Yeah.
It comes on December 25th every year.
Yeah.
But if you start planning for your budget for Christmas earlier, you can save teeny tiny amounts. It doesn't have to affect your budget as much to make a powerful impact later.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to get to that point when you feel like I can't even pay my bills now.
Yeah.
And that's why we start where we do. So before we start trying to conquer Christmas, we just try to get all the bills paid.
Right.
And so we move forward from there.
So what would you say to a couple, or not a couple, if one, like the wife or the husband, comes to you and says, hey, Sarah, can you help me with budgeting, but the other partner is not interested in becoming a part of it? Do you work with individuals, or does it have to be, we're talking about relationships, so obviously it has to be the two of them. But what if one of them is not even interested?
I've had that happen. And I've totally counseled just one person in a couple, and they've come and they've done the work for themselves, and it still impacted their partner because they changed their own behavior. They changed their own frame of mind. I think it's Rachel Hollis, who I love, but she says, if you want to change someone else, change yourself.
Yes.
And so that's what we focus on. Not every partner is going to be interested. They don't want to talk about it. They everything's fine by them, and that's okay. But what's within your control?
Exactly.
And always go back to that. Your attitude's within your control. What you spend on is in your control. How you view what your partner views as important is within your control. And you can do a lot, even just as an individual within a couple. And as they see that change in you, more often than not, they go, wow, something's going on with you.
Yeah, tell me more. I want to do it too, kind of thing.
Yeah, or just like, you're kind of different, or I don't know what it is that you're doing, but I like the fact that you think that I should save for this new PlayStation. You know, I mean, if they all of a sudden see that this is a way that their needs can get met, most people get on board. Yeah. Most people are excited about any way that their personal needs are going to get met.
Yeah, yeah. So I was reading this, again, I was looking at Dave Ramsey, the website, the other day, and it said in 2017, State of Finances in the American Household Survey conducted by the Ramsey Solutions, it says 1 in 3 of those who argue with their spouse about money confess they had purchases hidden from their spouse. So we're talking about the financial infidelity. But in terms of what you described about really sitting down and talking about finances and then, you know, setting budgets for like, okay, my husband wants a PlayStation. Mm-hmm. And then you want to start a business. It sounds like this then would not happen, right? Because it's almost like you have accounted for every incoming, your paycheck. And there's no room for somebody to like hide purchases from their spouse.
Right. It is very transparent, and at the same time, it's accounting for the things that are important.
Right.
So I very recently spent $150 on a pair of really cute shoes.
I love it.
Which, I'll be honest, if we didn't have the system that we had, James thinks that spending $150 on a pair of really cute shoes is kind of crazy. But it doesn't matter because it was my money that I spent on it.
Right.
It was money that I had set aside to spend on anything that I want. And so when he buys 6 new movies to add to his 500 movies he has on, I just go, okay, because it's his money.
Right.
And you're right. That's part of it is I don't have to hide things from him because I have money set aside for things that matter to me.
Yeah.
And so, and part of that, and I've done that before. Not with James, but with other relationships, I've totally hid things from other people before. Like, oh gosh, I don't want them to know I spent that. Because we didn't talk about stuff like that. But having the money set aside for the things that I consider important, then I can spend it and not feel bad.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I really like that a lot. That's what, when I was talking about, I worked with my friend Michelle, she had me create these buckets, like essentially I had 4 different accounts. You know, one was for the main bills, like I paid bills from that account. The other account was my personal account where I would, you know, if I needed to go out to happy hour, that's where that money would come from. I need a manicure, pedicure, it'll come from that. And then the other account was savings. Like this is where, you know, where you guys, financial people, say you should have so many months saved up, you know, 6 months, I think is what the number that people throw out there. And then the other savings account was for traveling because I love to travel. And so I had 4 accounts where when I got my paycheck, it went into these, you know, it's split up into these 4 buckets essentially. And it was just so nice to see and not worry about, you know, I want to go to Europe. I'm putting money towards that. You know, I want to buy a new Louis Vuitton bag. Well, it's coming out of my personal account. So I had to watch that account go up, you know, till I can afford that bag. And it actually is nice because I never, even though it's just me, I don't have a partner, it's just me, but it just helped me not feel guilty. Because, you know, I mean, when you're spending money and you're just buying things, you know, at least for me, I feel guilty because I know I could be spending my money in other ways, saving for retirement and all that. But having them in those buckets really helped me. But this is after I did the exercise that you talked about, where I really went to look at where my money was going from January to April.
Right.
And when I discovered I was giving Whole Foods $500 a month. So, and you walk out of there with one bag of groceries each time, and you've just spent $100. So it's like, well, maybe Whole Foods is not the only place where you can go shop. Like here, I can go to Sprouts and still get that organic, the organic vegetables that I was looking for.
Right.
So yeah. So I like that. Before we recap on the things that you talked about, what advice or what other tips do you have for people? I know we're going to include some of those links in the comments, but any other things that you want to touch on that you feel like people usually ask you?
I think the thing that people talk about most is really just, how do I even start this conversation? I've been in a relationship with my partner for a period of time. And we've totally not talked about it the whole time. When you're just starting out, it's easier because you're still learning about each other. But when you've been in a relationship for a period of time, it can feel a little bit different.
Right.
To start talking about something like money when it's obvious you haven't been talking about it all along. And you probably already have some maybe sensitive feelings about it. And so, I always tell people to go someplace pleasant. But really, I think it's approaching the subject in a way, and this is the advice I usually give people, is you need to approach it in a way that talks about how you want to make your relationship better. It's, don't focus on the things that annoy you. Don't focus on the things that are driving you crazy about their spending habits. That's not what we're starting with here. The thing you want to do in your initial conversation is let them know that you love them, that you're like, hey, I know we never made a point of talking about this in our relationship. We've never really talked about money. And I think things would be a lot easier for us if we learned a little bit more about each other. I would love to understand better where you're coming from when it comes to money, so that I can really honor what's important to you.
Yeah.
And make our relationship better. And then you listen.
Yeah.
And, as hard as it may be, because especially when you have a history with someone of things that are hard and emotional, coming at it from a place of, I just want to understand. And, you just listen.
Right.
Helps the other person be a lot more open to really sharing with you where they're coming from, and starting a conversation about something that, in other circumstances you've had a lot of maybe arguments about, or things like that. And so you kind of have to do a little bit of backtracking.
Right.
You kind of have to go back to let's pretend that we were first dating. What would we talk about when we were first dating? If we knew now, if we knew then what we know now, what would we have talked about?
Right.
And so I think that can be kind of a way of going about it, so that you can start to have conversations. Again, I know I've said it a million times, but it's really key to do that when you're not looking at bills.
Right.
Not talking about money.
Yeah.
Because it's just too hard. And the open communication where you're really going to learn something about the other person, it just doesn't happen when you're like, oh my gosh, we don't have money for this, and you spent it on, a guitar, and we needed something else. And, you're not going to learn anything valuable about your partner in those moments. No,
that's why, I like your recommendation of going somewhere, talking about it while you're doing something fun that you both enjoy.
Yeah. When you're in a good, happy place, because, we're always more open to hearing other people's points of view when we're in a good mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a big one. I think for anyone that's avoided the conversation for a long time, it's not too late to start having those conversations.
Right.
You know, and maybe you're the person that hasn't had anything to do with the finances. And you just say, "Yeah, I just like to learn. Can I just sit with you?" Even if you don't want to. They'll probably feel really awesome that you just want to sit there and listen to them.
Yeah.
And it would help start that conversation with them like, "Oh, wow, they finally actually want to learn about this." You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah.
So to sort of recap the process, I'm going
Yes.
to do my best because I was writing down some notes. So you're going to help me out to make sure that I am like representing your process in terms of like how you work with people. But before I get into it, do you only work with people in Oregon or do you work with people in other states?
I work with people all over. Yeah. So if I live in the Portland metro area, so if you live in the area, we can totally meet in person. That's always fun. Otherwise, we get to meet like this and
on video.
on video. And so I've worked with people all over the country. And so it's definitely, it doesn't have to be in person. So we just FaceTime or Zoom meet.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if I was being a good student listening to what you were telling me, I wrote down that the first process that you walk through your couples or anybody really that goes through your program is that you give them homework. And the homework is really to sort of find out from each other how your experience with money was like when you were growing up. Was finances a dinner table discussion or was it not? Did you grow up in a household where you didn't know if you're going to have food on the table the next day? Because that changes how your relationship with money is like. Like really get to find out each other's experiences or history with money has been, right?
Yep.
And then the second thing that I wrote down that you have your couples go through is to figure out what the rules about money. And I think when you were talking about that, it actually reminded me of when I was married. What we did was, and we didn't have money, we said if you were spending anything over $100, you needed to call the other person and tell them. And then as a couple, you decide, is this good or not? Well, I am like you. I like those $150 boots or shoes. So it was always me calling my ex-husband to say, I found a really good deal. These boots were $400. They're only $150. Can I buy them? So, and usually he'll be like, no, because you already have like 10 pairs in the at home. But anyway, I mean, it sounds silly, but it worked out in our relationship. And we actually set it up to where in our checking account, it would alert us both that, you have spent money outside of that whatever window, like $100 that you put, and then it'll alert both of us like, you just spend $120 at Nordstrom, And so there's no hiding of things. I can't hide them in the trunk of my car and take him in later when he's not watching because he already knows I did that.
Well, secrets are bad for relationships. So.
I know. Yeah. And, financial infidelity is not good. Yeah. So the third thing, which is values. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think each person has kind of one value that money kind of serves for them. And so I mentioned that my husband's is security. So money to him is security.
Oh, I see.
To me, money is more, money's a tool.
Right.
But, which is not necessarily a value I get, but money to me is something more that I use to create like my life. And so for me, it's more about like pleasure. It's not, I'm not going to feel better if I have $100,000 in the bank and I've not had any fun for the last 10 years. Not that I have to have fun all the time, but I want to live my life. I want to go to the ballet. I want to travel. I want to have money in my savings account because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel good. See, and so it's, for me, it's about creating a pleasurable experience in life.
Yeah.
And that's what I want money to do for me. It's, you know, I take great pleasure in my home, and, you know, and so for me, that's important. And so I take great pleasure in my $600 boots, but they're beautiful. And
Yeah.
I've had them for years. Their return on investment is huge, but for him, he needs the security. He needs the money to just sit there and just know that it's always there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
security blanket for him. Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. But for him, that's the purpose that money serves.
But you found that out because you did the exercise, you know, to know what's important to him. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we use that as a way to, when we start to have a moment where we don't understand each other about money, because it still happens, it gives us a reference point to come back to.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've been on maternity leave now for almost 4 months, and we got creative with our money to make that happen. And one of the things that we did was, well, we did, and I realized later that I did not as fully discuss it with James as I thought I had, is that I cut our spending money in half for one of the months.
And he didn't know.
I thought we discussed this thoroughly, but we had two different understandings of what that meant. He thought that when the next month came around, we would recoup that half and the current months.
Okay.
And I was like, no, that's dead. It's gone. Like, it's not coming back. And it prompted a discussion on our part, because it occurred to me that while he wants this safety blanket, and while he had an upbringing that meant that he didn't always have a lot of household money, any personal money he had, he kept. And so he was very rarely in a position that he didn't have at least a little bit of money to spend on something he wanted. And I said, hang on a second. Have you ever been in a position where you have no money to spend on something that you want? Like, none? He's like, no, because I always saved a little bit.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So for me, when money gets tight, the spending money is the first thing that goes.
Right.
Like, that's nice. I like having it, but it's gone. And I don't expect to see it again. And so I walked him through how through years of history, I won't relay here, but I walked him through how my mind had gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay. I was like, it did not even occur to me that you had not, at some point in your upbringing, because knowing where he came from, I thought at some point he would have just had no money, like none. And that was never true. He's used to having something.
Yeah.
If he wants something, and he was getting low, and so he was starting to feel that nervousness. And so I had made a decision that made perfect sense to me because of my history. And we'd never encountered this before. But I was like, oh, I'm pushing your security button, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, wow.
And so we were able to talk about that in a way that wasn't like, you know, it was very different than just, well, I made this decision and you're just going to live with it because that's what I do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the finance person and I do that. You know, it was, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That for him. And so it helped us to really go back. So basically that's what those values are really supposed to do.
Yeah.
If you understand the purpose that you feel that money serves in your life for each of you individually,
right,
then it helps you to have kind of a guiding point to go back to when you start to have a misunderstanding.
Yeah. No, that's very important. I never looked at it that way, and what a huge realization for you guys in your relationship, for sure.
Right. And you will continue to learn these things if you're keeping this open communication.
Yeah.
You know, just as you learn about things about your partner for years, you continue to learn new things. And the same is true about money. As you find yourself in different situations, you learn new things. But if you've made a regular habit of discussing, remaining open, and then keeping that component of what's the history? What are our values? Why does this present itself in this way?
Right.
Assuming that, James is never going to consciously cause me grief when it comes to finances. It's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
Always coming from a different place. How can I understand that? And so by focusing our conversations around those things, it strengthens our bond and helps us understand each other and not have fights about money.
Yeah.
We're learning about each other.
Yeah. So to continue to see if I was being a good student, the next thing then after values, then you now start to talk about money.
Yep.
And that's, you talked about doing money audit, where you give your couples or whoever you're working with homework of like, okay, let's take a look at like 3 months. And how have you been spending your money? Where has it been going to? And actually like, putting down how much money you're spending in groceries, how much money you're spending in entertainment, in this, and like literally putting it all down to see exactly where the money is going.
Right.
And then you talked about then creating a personalized budget. And if I was listening correctly, I think you were talking about this is now where you say, okay, this is the money where bills is going to come from. This is our money for entertainment. This is our money for, I think you talked about one of your couples like video games or something like that. Like this, you literally create a budget for each thing that where your values, I guess, or likes fall into. And then you talked about that you personally use an app called You Need a Budget app.
Yep.
And that's linked to your account, and it helps you even with those things that we're talking about, right? In terms of like where your money is going. I think I'm doing great on this list.
You're doing great.
And then you start working the budget, like literally working the budget and trying it out and seeing, because this is a new change that you have made for the two of you or for yourself. And then you optimize your budget, and then you make some long-term goals. So thinking about all these things that I have 4 different main things here, which is the homework, the rules, the values, and then the money. How many sessions are you walking your couples through to, from start to sort of where you can say, okay, now you're ready to go do it on your own?
It kind of depends on where they're starting from. So the first initial session is kind of where they get that homework to do the conversation with themselves. They can come back and we can do the rules and the values and talk about their histories. That could be another session. We could do the audit and the budget all in one session, depending on their situation. They could come back and we could do one optimized session, and they could be great.
Okay.
It really it depends on what their long-term goals are and kind of where they're starting from, and how much knowledge they have kind of coming into it. And so I don't necessarily limit those. It's really kind of, for some people, they need a lot, that budget, it takes a while to work out the kinks in that. Right. So they need we do a lot more emailing back and forth about questions about the budget. And so that's part of the coaching package, is that in addition to having, these kind of face-to-face sessions where we do kind of the prep work for the homework, where we come back and round back about the homework, there's also things that we email about. So if they have a question, they're like, I can't remember what we talked about, or we're coming up against this struggle, I can give them some advice as they continue to work through it. And if they're in a place where they're like, okay, and now we're going to buy a home and we're going to have a baby, and they want me to work through those things with them, then yeah, it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
A few more sessions. But it just depends on kind of what their goals are. And so I leave that up to them. So I have a variety of different really package options that could be available. They all include, the first initial kind of call and the first couple kind of calls that everybody has. And then it's based on what the goals are, how much email access the person wants from me. And then we kind of create a package from there that people do. And so then it can meet their needs for what they're really looking for. So if they're really just looking to the place, it's like, oh, we just need to get the budget and we'll worry about optimizing, in a year. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am so grateful that you took time to chat with me about finances. I've wanted to do this, and you just actually encouraged me to. This is March. So at the end of the month, I think I'm just going to look at what my spending has been like from January through March, and just seeing, where my money's going and where I need to adjust and, continue to follow the budget that I created. It's been a few years, so I need to tweak it, right? Because I'm in a different place now. And so I just need to look at that a little more. So, yeah. So thank you. And it's SB Financials or financial.com.
So it's Sarah Blanchfield Financial.com. Mm-hmm. I'll spell it out. The company is SB Financial, but you can go onto the website and maybe we can link it in the notes. And we'll have some of those resources for everybody available. But there's, you can go onto the contact page, and if people are interested in doing any kind of coaching, we can do an initial kind of chat to talk about what we might do that can meet people's needs. And I have a ton of free resources on the webpage as well, so people can have things that they can use just for free, because I want people to feel good about where they're at with their money, and whether they do coaching with me or they just use some resources, it's all the same to me. I just want people to get to a better place so that they can feel like their life is not quite so stressful when it comes to money.
Yeah, they can have a better relationship with money. No, I like that. So it doesn't matter whether you make $5 an hour, $100, $2,000 an hour. It does not matter. You work with anyone who needs, who has a goal, right, to set financially. So, and it doesn't matter, actually, a lot of people feel like I don't make a lot of money, so I should not be saving. Like you said earlier, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You bought a house when you were making, a little bit less than you're making less than where you are right now, right. But you were still able to buy a house because you were able to tap into some of the resources that are available to us, right, that we may not be aware of. Right. So, I encourage anybody who's listening, it doesn't matter what like I said, how much money you make. I think it's important. This is one of my things that I try to talk to my friends, my family, that saving money is important. Mm-hmm. And, get help. Get the free resources from Sarah's website and learn. Have a good relationship with money. It's really not as bad as it seems, or it's not as daunting. Once you start to work with what you have, you can actually make a really good plan that will give you peace of mind, that security that we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So again, thank you for taking time to chat with me today.
Yeah.
It's quite a treat. I get to talk to you twice in 1 month. So
Well, thank you so much for having me again. It was so much fun. I love talking about finances and things like that. And so hopefully people can get some really good stuff out of it and some ways that they can talk with their partners and just learn.
yeah. And if they have any questions, they will reach out to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to go to iTunes. You can subscribe, rate, and write a review. And also, you can always find more information about any of the episodes on my website, www.realloverealstories.com. And remember to follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and it's all under Real Love, Real Stories. Till next time.